So thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to David, Lucretia, Dan and Tony for joining the panel. And just to say, this is the first webinar collaboration between Renewed, most of you are members of Renewed, and the Media Entrepreneur Meetup, which we host. There's quite a significant overlap between the two groups, but also some difference in the Venn diagram. And it's really nice to find some common ground to communicate together. So I hope it'll be a fun session. I think all of the speakers and I encourage you to ask questions and stop us as we go along. It's meant to be a peer group discussion, hence the request to have your camera on if you're going to participate in that way. So I'll introduce the speakers when I ask them their first question. Just wanted to start the conversation around this idea of the visionary integrator model. So it comes out of Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, who also wrote Traction. I know some of you on this call probably use the EOS methodology. We use it somewhat in my business as well. So a visionary progress. Oh, sorry, there was just a background noise from Robert. A visionary is defined as the person who had the original great idea, conceived a company, continues to look to expand the business and pushes ideas forward. They tend to be the founding entrepreneur, have big ideas, and is a relationship and salesperson. Unfortunately, he or she can also create chaos. Dan and Lucretia are laughing. I'm not.
Is it that obvious?
Has limited patience for details. My CMO Rebecca is laughing, gets distracted by shiny stuff. Tony's CEO and board are laughing and wants to implement every single one of his or her ideas immediately. An integrator is the person who thrives on putting systems and processes in place in order to bring order to the chaos. He or she is a great task master and manager, is good at holding people accountable, creating consistency and integrating the leadership team. So I think we understand that often these skill sets overlap and that many people who are integrators have vision of their own. And I think it's a theme that Lucretia and David will pick up later. However, according to Rocket Fuel research, and because it's a business book, we must believe it, only 1 out of 20 degrees, which they say is 5%, possesses both skill sets of the visionary and the integrator. So the problem may not be the integrators lacking vision. It may be the people starting companies lacking integration skills. And I'm sure that's a theme we'll come back to. So speaking of which, David, great to see you again. BVR isn't your first business, which is one reason I really wanted to have you in this conversation. So you've chosen to work with Lucretia as your president, brackets, integrator. When did your relationship start? Why did you choose to go into business together? What's the story there?
Lucretia and I have known each other since my previous business and have worked together for a long time. Lucretia left, went and got an MBA and did all sorts of interesting larger company and smaller company activities before we reunited at BVR. But the quick answer to that is I followed BVR as a very small, very entrepreneurial, first phase entrepreneurial company with great content from the point when the founders started it. When it became available, I wanted to buy it, but it was definitely first stage, and the job was much bigger than I knew I could do on my own. So Lucretia was, thanks to Hurricane Katrina, was at a change point in her life, since she was living in New Orleans at the time, or in Louisiana. We ended up, that just worked out perfectly. So the negative of that was the two of us came into it with sort of the same model I had in my first company. I've always been fortunate enough to have a partner, and we've always sort of, worked as a team.
Sorry, someone's not.
Dell, I think that's you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll mute it.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that. That's one of the great things on the offense as we've been doing these. We've had every sort of sound interruption you can imagine, some completely inappropriate. Anyway, to end the answer to your question, I've been used to working in partnership. So Lucretia and I sort of started as partners. And I think, Lucretia, you'll talk more about this in a minute, so I won't jump on it. But that worked wonderfully at the beginning until it completely failed because the roles were not defined as clearly as what you just kicked this call off with. So the one sentence answer is it was a great opportunity, but I knew it was bigger than I could do on my own, and I needed a friend and a lot of help.
Great, thank you. So we'll come back to how that relationship evolved and Lucretia's perspective on it. But just from another founder's perspective, so Tony Craddock, welcome. You ran the Payments Association and its predecessors as CEO and Director General of the Trade Association part for many years before hiring Ben Agnew as your CEO. What changed to make that happen? And what was your thinking at the time where you appointed Ben? Or you on the board?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me along. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to share some thoughts with a group like this. You know, what's interesting is nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know, I want a flat white pain au chocolat and a CEO. It's like, it doesn't happen that way. So it's very much a journey. And I remember I was attending a conference in Barcelona with my, at the time, executive chairman. And he said, look, over a drink, as often these things are, look, you've got to decide, is this a lifestyle business or is it a grow and exit business? And, you know, I've had a number of companies in my time. I've always got to about 15 people, only managed to sell one of them really quite modestly. And I said, look, actually, one of my big ambitions in life is to be able to realize some value from what I'm growing, you know, grow a sustainable business that's got legs and that I can bequeath to the world. And I said that with great passion at the time. And he said, okay, so you've got to do things differently because at the moment you're heading to be a lifestyle business, a nice one, but that's all. And then so I came back and by chance, I was introduced to Piers, and Piers sat down and he persuaded me of the importance of getting outside input as to be the catalyst for making some changes, one of which quite initially was actually to have a darn good hard look at my finance function, which, you know, one of Piers' teams did for me. And then through advice from somebody else, it was recognized that as long as the community I was with was so closely identified with me as the founder, the company is called EPA equals TC. That was the top of her consulting paper. And as long as that's the case, as long as you are the founder is the company, you'll never realize value. You'll always be trapped into it. And actually, in my case, I'd be really good at building businesses to 15, but no bigger. The other thing that happened is we had a bit of a shock, and it was called the pandemic. So just after this paper was written, we've discovered that you know, we had a month where we didn't sell anything. And our whole community, I run a trade association, the whole community was looking to us for advice and guidance and support because everybody was scared. And we had to make a very important choice. We made this at board level. We either retrench or invest. And at that time, we decided, well, actually, you only do this once. You might as well invest. You can get opportunity in a recession. So we did that on processes, technology, and people. Number one person that we needed was a CEO. And we persuaded Ben to join us. I think he had a number of offers on the table at the time. And the difference has been material to the extent that we are currently hitting 20% growth above an ambitious target. And we're actually turning over revenue in the first 6 months of this financial year 100% above last year. And I can honestly put it down to the fact that we've got these two people in place, me doing what I'm like to think is my unique ability, and Ben being a superb business manager.
Thank you for making the case for people attending the session, Tony. That's really encouraging. Very inspiring. So let's come to defining the different roles. And I think it's really important to hear from the integrators here. Lucretia Lyons, first of all. So we were kind of laughing about this before the session, but there are definite risks and potential frustrations in working with creative founder and CEO, but also successful founder and CEO. So why did you take the role with BVR? And then how did this role split? How did you address it? How did you change it over time to make it functional with David? I think you're
sorry about that. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, David summarized the first part of our story really well. And the story before that is that, you know, knowing each other from his first company, the Institute of Management and Administration, where I really fell in love with business to business marketing. David was an amazing mentor. So I consider one of the great serendipities in life, in my life, was being fortunate enough for the timing to work out so well with him purchasing BVR and tapping me for this role. I would have followed him anywhere. It's kind of if he said, I'm buying a gas station and I need an attendant. Sounds great. I'm so thankful that it's a much more interesting company. But as we talked about a little bit on the pre-call, BVR was 2 million when David first purchased it. So we had all sorts of fun in the early days. It was easy growth, right? I mean, easy to get from 2 to 2.5 to 3. Coming in, we did a lot of cleanup on products where we had, there were 9 people working on 2 unprofitable products. So we could make pretty easy, obvious changes. So we just had a hoot of a time up until, the first, 7 years or so. And I think our story changes, and the story of the role definition really comes in 2013, whereas, as David alluded to, we just sort of started colliding, imploding, tripping over each other, causing confusion, getting mad at each other, which was completely an unfamiliar emotion. So we were fortunate enough to be gifted with some time with a superb organizational consultant through our network, and really decided to tackle what we needed to do with the organization. We did have a structure, but we didn't have a formal management team. So the roles, David was going to the 3 levels down, direct reports, as was I. The managers were getting even more irritated with us than they normally would. So inflection point 2013, we really hunkered down and decided to address what we needed to do to take BVR to the next point. I'm not exactly remembering where we were revenue wise, but again, we've nearly quadrupled where we were originally, but maybe we were halfway there, David, or maybe 2/3 of the way to where we are now. So really important to define who was doing what, who was reporting to whom. So the first part of this work with the organizational consultant, which immediately I think transformed our thinking, was and thanks to this session, I actually found myself digging out from the archives some of the exercises and the work that we had done with Ron. And one of the things that we did was he put together a survey for us that was went out to our management team to talk about how they felt about their ownership within BVR, their ownership of work within BVR, the value of their input, how well they felt control over their departments. And David and I were so feeling so brazen about things, or like we said, we just send it to all employees. And Ron wisely said, let's start with the management team. And when we got the results, I think that was a real turning point, and one that David and I will likely never forget. When we got the results of this survey, it was a real truth, a real eye-opening, truthful moment for us both, because we saw how invested the leadership team was in BVR, but how little control they felt over the direction of the company, the decision making. And we realized that hey, it's actually not going to be a behemoth of a task to make this work, especially now that we've already made already put this structure in place to get feedback from the managers. So we really took this feedback to heart. And that was, it's interesting now looking back on it, because that was about halfway to where we are now. And we were able to, when with David in the CEO role, we were able to articulate that I should be managing things internally. He should be managing development opportunities from the outside. Yet there was a lot of overlap still, because we have, we're a 30-person company, so there's a lot that we're both working on, product development wise, marketing wise. So we certainly cherish and value David's input with all of it. But I feel that out of that work, at that midpoint, came a structure where I kind of feel I'm the middle woman in between, the top, the visionary, kind of taking, filtering it down into maybe a little more realistic terms for the team, and then being able to allocate the work, and letting the organization really set the tempo, the momentum. And I think we both were able to, kind of come to terms with that and accept that. And, not without its bumps since then, but truly transformational. And I mean, the moment of truth, realizing, wow, we really do need to define the roles. We need David's CEO goals articulated, delineated, to know what we're working for, what growth percentage he wants, what we're looking to do. And I think we've been able to maintain that pretty well. I know we have one of our managers on the call. She might have an alternate perspective, but she's one who keeps us very honest. But anyway, didn't mean to take so much time with that, but it was such a rewarding reflection on that. So I hope that speaks to the question.
Oh, epic fail. So two very clear things there. So one is getting very specific advice on org chart, and we're going to come back to org chart and the different ways one can do that a bit later. And I like what you said about tempo and targets as well. This sort of modulation and moderation. While you were talking about that, Dan Loosemore, who's the COO at Data Center Dynamics, was almost laughing out loud. I don't know why, but we're going to ask him. So Dan, your journey to your COO number 2 in the org chart at DCD now, you didn't come in that role. So how did it evolve, and what role are you now playing in terms of your relationship with the CEO and founder?
Yeah, I actually came into the business as CMO, which was at the time a massive pain point. So a lot of what you were saying, Lucretia, resonates in terms of trying to channel some of that vision. I think a big thing for DCD at the time was diversification of revenues away from what was quite a pure play events model into more of a marketing services type business, which is where I specialise and why I came in that CMO function, Piers. And for example, I think we had 50 different websites at the time that we were trying to traffic, and so it needed some structure and some integration from the quote unquote integrator. And I think what was really important is it allowed me to focus on that specific pain point and really get alignment with the CEO on what the key challenges were and how we would get to that North Star. And you just spoke about the same thing in your journey, David and Lucretia, in terms of identifying what that North Star goal is for the business and then lining up every department and every senior manager behind it. Mm-hmm. I think that was really important. And so coming in a specific function actually helped crystallize that, and I think make it easier initially. And I also think, Piers, one of the differences is David and Lucretia, you guys had a pre-existing relationship. Myself and George at DCD did not. So I think by coming in that quite distinct function and being able to enact change and meaningful change pretty quickly, I think that also helps to build trust and maybe accelerate quicker once that trust is built. So in a way, I'd say that was quite helpful, Piers. And from there, in terms of how that built out, once that marketing function was firing and sort of unified behind that singular vision of DCD as a marketing services function, naturally that impacted the way that we were recruiting for sales and for content heads and for editorial. So I think pretty naturally from that point sort of impacted the wider departments in the business. And actually at the time, there wasn't a great deal of senior management in place. So it meant that we could recruit specifically for the types of people we needed for the next phase of growth, which I think was useful as well and very helpful to me because I've now got a senior management team that I trust and count on.
Yeah. So David just replied to something you were talking about there about alignment. Figuring out how to keep aligned is a major element of success. I think a key part of this might well be discomfort as well. So, I mean, Lucretia expressed very vividly the discomfort that the management team were feeling at BVR. I think a question for Dan and Tony is, to what extent has working with a different personality type created functional versus dysfunctional discomfort between you and your partners and the impact on management team? After you answer that, I'd like to pause for audience questions because we're coming up to halfway, and then we'll do that again towards the end of the session. So Dan, would you like to go first? Discomfort alignment.
Sure. I'll start with the comfortable thing first, because actually this is actually maybe my second or third integrator type role. I think where I've been quite lucky this time is George and myself naturally have quite different skill sets. So DCD started as a publisher, print publishing. George is very, very good on brand and on relationships and on the look and feel, and maybe some of those things that you were talking about, Tony, in terms of that network and that relationship, which is very hard to replicate. And obviously I didn't have, whereas my strengths would be more on strategic planning to hit those goals and to help the departmental managers get to where they need to get to. So naturally in DCD's case, there was a level of comfort in us both realizing and being cognizant of our own strengths and weaknesses, which I think has helped us get to where we're getting to. I'd say in terms of the discomfort bit, Piers, it's really important to have those conversations regularly and iteratively in terms of, look, this isn't working when you do this, or your skill set is not here, so let me focus on A, B, and C. You're much better at X, Y, and Z. And just, especially when the business is growing, to do that consistently and to maybe have those uncomfortable conversations is, I think, also pretty key. And I'd credit George in being very good at doing that and sort of challenging each other to have those conversations.
Yeah. So Tony, Stephanie's asked a question which is relevant to your answer as well. Stephanie Williford. Seems like a prior relationship and trust is key to a successful partnership. Dan's indicated a way that you can get past that. What's your experience been in terms of building trust with Ben and the kind of discomfort alignment question?
Yeah, really, really good question. There was no prior relationship. I didn't know Ben beforehand. He came well recommended by you guys actually at Collingwood. So prior relationship is not a prerequisite, and trust doesn't come until you've worked together for a little while. What I think we did have was a shared goal. Not even a shared vision, but a shared goal, which is we wanted to build something that was sustainable and then extract some value from it. That was kind of our joint goal. Ben had never done that before. He'd been in businesses that happened to him, but he hadn't been a part of the journey and the reward. So that was something I was happy to share. I've got to be honest with you, at the beginning, the thing that we did well was restructure. So the board, and I think you've got a question on that later, haven't you, Piers? So maybe don't answer that.
Jump ahead, that's fine.
Yeah, so restructuring. So I report to the board, and so does Ben. And we both are accountable to the business for different things. Ben is accountable for all the numbers. So which is a bizarre thing, really, because I'm the major shareholder. But as a board director, I'm looking to him to deliver the operational results for the business, and that also works well. The other thing we did in the first 6 weeks, we went through line by line the different functions in the business, and we defined the tasks. So I'd done this before, I'd prepared all this. We went through it, and I said, well, which bit are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm no good at doing that bit. Why don't you do that bit? And I said, okay, well, I can do this bit. But all these things, I suddenly realized that I didn't have much left to do. And that was a bit scary. Honestly, it was a bit scary. But I also, bear in mind, I know I'm a good starter. I'm very good at starting things, which is one of the things both is my strength and my weakness. I'm much less good at finishing stuff off. So the other thing we've got is a series of processes in place that when I'm out there making rain or doing something that's creative, which I love to do, we have a process that I've got to go through in order for the business to accept it. Got a business case process. I've got to fill in a bloody form. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I've never filled in a form in my life. Anyway, I do now.
The surrendering of power to the collective in the company is such a key element, I think, in what you've done. David, I was glad you raised your hand because you were going to talk about alignment and happiness, but I think you were going to respond to Tony as well.
Well, it's when you look at the people who are on the call with us today, I think there's not a person on the call who doesn't have the capability to be both the inspiring visionary and the integrator. There's a lot of talent on this call today. So to Tony's point and to Dan's point, like the part of getting the trust in a relationship is realizing that you got to stop doing some things. So like my inclination to try to manage, a marketing program or something like that, Lisa's on the call here. That's not going to help Lucretia. That's going to make things way more confusing and complicated. So there's literally that part of, like at the beginning, I really had to struggle with just saying nothing. The correct response is to say nothing, because I'm just going to confuse everyone if I chime in here. And so it's a little bit, there's some sadness in saying, well, I've got all these great capabilities that I've all this wonderful experience, and it's completely ineffective now. So stop doing that. That's a hard adjustment. But boy, I'm still struggling with it since 2013 because my instincts. I had a lot of experience before this, but so Tony, I empathize with what you're saying. What I can say is I have a whole ton of friends over my years in publishing who stopped at 15 employees and never got any further because they didn't make the change you just made,
And it's quite hard to sell a 15-person business, because you haven't got the processes, you haven't got the rock solid structure that you can take the CEO, what was the founder CEO, out, which I know when we exit, I need to be expendable. I need to be somebody who I can, perhaps, if they want me to, remain in role, either creating presence, brand, using some of the regulator relationships that I've built up over 25 years, or they might just want me out of play, and I have to be able to do one or the other. Yeah. And unless you've got the fundamental structures in place to allow you to do that, then nobody will buy you. Nobody will invest in you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, Piers keeps on telling me.
Yes, we'll come back to that. Bring in Lucretia, and then I'd like to involve Julian and Andy in the conversation. We've made some really great contributions.
Yeah, definitely. And just quickly building on Dave, it's just reminding me again, going back to our 2013 inflection point, and I think all of what we're describing speaks to the tempo, trusting the tempo, kind of giving it over. And with the structure, David and I think are much better, where he and I can talk offline, and I can remind him why, yes, that idea is amazing and brilliant and incredible, but we're already doing like 13 things, and I cannot move all of the tech resources to do this. So put it on, so he and I can kind of work on it on the side before sort of, dumping it to the management team. And again, we've relinquished, I think, the cadence of the organization to the people who are doing the work and making it all happen. So.
Great, thank you. Well said. So to involve other people on the call, and just if you joined a little bit later and you want to say something, do drop a note in chat, physically raise your hand, or use the raise hand function on Zoom. Julian Rose, for those who don't know, Julian managed a succession at his own business, Chemical Watch, and successfully exited in the middle of the pandemic. Congratulations, Julian. You were talking about what Tony was saying about business case was, I think, resonating with you. Is there anything you can add to the discussion on that in terms of your process?
Well, just that I identify with the humiliation of it, and I'm with you there. And I can also vouch for how crucial a step it is, because it's the problem is that when you're the CEO in a small business, people have the tendency to listen to you and just do what you say, which is probably not a wise idea, because you won't have thought about all the consequences. And it's just part of the maturity step where you start to take a sober assessment of what's going on. And it's part of delegating authority, where you're allowing a wider management team to actually take the decisions. So yeah, I strongly relate to that, and I think it's important that everyone's accountable. Even if you're the majority owner, you need to be accountable in some way. So.
Yeah, I mean, for example, us doing this call today has created additional workload for my marketing team, because it's in addition to 2 other activities we'd had planned in this month that overlap with it in terms of ticking our boxes. I just thought it was cool and wanted to do it with David. I'm glad, but you know, we have a section in our management meeting every week called Sun Shining, where everyone confesses what they've done wrong, and I'm always the first person up. Anyway, Andy Swinson, you were talking about avoiding confusing people. Is there anything you want to add to the group and the discussion?
Yeah, good to see you all. It's Swindler.
Swindler, sorry, my message in the wrong place.
A name you can trust. I'm grateful to see you all. Just a tiny bit of context. Most folks here probably know me back from SIPA when I had Aztec. We did a lot of web marketing and web development. And now I have a new startup called Feel Real, and we're working to bring social emotional learning into business environments, which we think is just a core skill for leaders and other people. And yeah, I was uplifting that comment, which actually Julian just spoke to so well, about just the weight of being a leader, especially an owner, and just this, you know, I might think it's a roll-off comment or something, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, we got to do that. And but the other thing that occurred to me is that I think there's an unconscious desire sometimes to just sort of surround myself with people like me, including in hiring. And this comes from the Colby model, but I know I'm a quick start. So that idea of jumping in and having a really high risk tolerance, and just sort of jumping in and saying, oh, I'll figure it out and stuff like that. And those are great qualities for in some ways for a visionary, and certainly in a startup with a chaotic environment. But there's also a huge risk there of creating an unbalanced environment when not having the structures and not having that. So I really always have to catch myself in that, because there's a kind of comfort in being surrounded with people who sort of function like me and see the world like I do, but it's just not going to be the right balance.
Well said, thank you. So any other questions at this stage, or we're ready to jump back?
Here's if I can jump in with one thing, just adding on to what Andy was saying. There's a conversation on the Renewed Guilds community recently about someone was talking about sort of having the importance of having a cranky person on the management team, and which I think I'm not quite sure I agree with that terminology, but having disparate voices is enormously important, and it's a delicate balancing act, and I think it's particularly hard on a founder or an owner to be able to add input without squelching dissenting views or differing views. And you know, as we've seen, as David and Lucretia have mentioned, David's found the solution is to bite his tongue and to follow up with Lucretia later. That may be practical for some people and may not be always practical, but I do think that's really important. And if the owner, founder, leader, whatever, is always sort of either squelching the conversation at the beginning by saying, here's what I think, but what do you all think? Or says, what do you all think? And then at the end says, well, that's great, but here's the real answer. Either of those are a problem for the organization, and you know, I think require remarkable emotional intelligence on the part of that person to maintain that balance.
Can I just jump in and can I just jump in a little bit, and just building on what I'd said there? There's something you referred to, emotional intelligence, and building also on Andy's point about collecting like-minded people around us. Quite often, that's what we tend to do. It's in human nature, and what is quite interesting is that there is something I think called founders syndrome, where you bring new people in and then the founder doesn't like it, so he gets rid of them, and then brings new people in and doesn't like them either. But the point is, you have to like the contrary view. Emotionally, I found this quite difficult, to be honest with you. Occasionally, I'd have to sit back and go, you know, this is wonderful, everything's great, high satisfaction, high renewal, high membership growth, high profit, everything's all good. But that's because occasionally, when I've got somebody who I've actually given significant responsibility over my future destiny, disagreeing with me about something that I feel personally very involved, I find it a struggle. And my default is to sit back, pause, not do email ping pong, avoid it at all costs, and either sit. I mean, in fact, there's one particular issue we're meeting tomorrow face to face. We have a fundamental disagreement about the development of one of our products. We've all done it the right way. We've done a case, done this, that, and the other, but we're going to meet face to face and talk it through. And all I can say is I'm committed to getting the best answer for the business, not what I want. And that emotional intelligence piece that you just mentioned, Ed, I can't say how difficult it is sometimes, but how important it is. Don't take it personally.
Yeah. Well, it comes to governance as well. I mean, I think, Tony, you've probably got the most classic governance structure now at Payments Association, from having had possibly the opposite a couple of years ago, where the board is governs the business in the correct way, and the contact between you and Ben goes through the board, and you're both accountable to the board. I think it'd be interesting to hear about sort of what good looks like in terms of role splits. There are different models for this. I think it's different at BVR, it's different at DCD. Lucretia and David, how have you set up the org chart in terms of reporting lines and accountabilities now? What do you find is optimal for you at this stage?
Well, what we have now is David is at the very top as CEO. I report to him, and then I have a 7-person management team, all of whom report directly to me, and they all have their direct reports. Lisa, who's on the call, has the largest department with our sales and marketing teams. We have a training director who does all of our webinars, a CFO, who was one of our gifts after said disastrous survey, where it was like, get a real CFO so we can actually do some P&L analysis. So she's a very strong accounting and finance department now. And I think, I mean, because we're in one core market, that works well for us. I think, we're in the middle of a very big product launch, which takes us a bit closer to the business to consumer market. When that succeeds, as we like to say, there will be, a very real, the reality around there being another division, which maybe there's some other structure that might be optimal, but for right now, I feel like me kind of in between, but David's still very much involved in all product development, all large decisions, the budgeting, the strategic planning conversations. I feel like it's pretty optimal right now. David, you might, if you've had any, thoughts you want to share, on other visions for that, I'd love to hear that.
No, I agree completely, because I think where your point is true. We had to switch the management team, particularly because like in 2016, 17, we had some very significant partner products and we had partner problems. So it was kind of a crisis mode. I'm not sure we would have survived that with the original management group that we had when we acquired and started with the company. It was a testament to that you had such a strong structure in place. We were really planful about that response, and we got through it. And you're talking about 30% of the company's revenues were suddenly in play while we were trying to grow. So not every management team fits with this new classic structure, as you described, like Tony's kind of thing, and so that's one thing. But Piers, the fact that you brought us all together for this discussion has caused me to keep learning about this. As Lucretia said earlier, we've both kind of gone back and looked, and I can still see ways where I have to keep adjusting my behavior so that I'm working mostly on the CEO job. The corporate titles, as you go from a launch to wild entrepreneurial to institutionalization to really full size functioning platform kind of company, it's an amazing switch in personality skills any of us need to ride that roller coaster. The way we act, the way we behave, how we try to form friendships, business friendships, who our community should be, all of those things are affected by what our job title is. So the organization chart, to some degree, it doesn't capture what you have to do to be a good managing director or CEO or president or whatever the titles are. It's not well defined in the literature, I don't think. So it's amazing any of us are succeeding.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a particular job title which is a problem, which is founder and CEO, where
yes.
The fun part is founder, and that's what you spend your time doing, and you happen to be sitting on a job that someone else should be doing.
Yes.
And I think what the implication of that, which has been solved in the tech industry, is what is a good founder? If the founder's staying full time with the business, is reporting to the board, how do you make that succeed? And we spent a fair time thinking about that, and so have others in the community. Dan, just read that question to you, because it's a slightly different setup at DCD in terms of, what are the reporting lines? Who reports to George? Who do you report to? Who reports to you?
Yeah, it is slightly. So at board level, it's very similar to the setup that Tony described, in terms of I'll very much do the numbers and the general health, and George will report on the sort of bigger picture, big projects, and I guess sort of exit strategy type stuff. In terms of reporting lines within the business, it's been a more gradual migration of me slowly picking up departments. So as I referenced, started with the marketing and editorial divisions. Naturally from there picked up all the commercial divisions, so sales, account management, client success, and then gradually now also picking up production as well, which George has, because he's so intertwined in the industry and he's 20 years into it, has historically and to some degree correctly protected. And so it's about finding a way for him to feed all of those ideas in without, as David was alluding to, sort of not giving accountability to the producers underneath him, which we still battle with. It's ongoing. So I'm slowly picking up those divisions. And then we also have a training business. So again, similar to what you guys were saying, the MD of the training business will still report into George directly. I've less experience on corporate L&D, so that works quite nicely for us right now. And I will just feed into marketing and sales process on that side. So a little bit unique. It's been a slower migration of departments and reporting lines. And I think within that as well, and I think David and Lucretia are alluding to this as well, when you have new products or new launches, you have to find a way to make those work outside of those quite siloed departments as well, and make sure that's clear within all of the departmental teams. So actually, what's the project team for this? Because it won't necessarily be reflective of the org chart. So who is working in this project team? So for example, we recently just did our first face-to-face event for 2 years post-pandemic. Actually, I didn't play that big a role in that project team because my head of marketing and my head of sales and the CEO himself were looking after that from a marketing and sales perspective, because it was an invitation only model. And so comfort level of the CEO wanted to make sure that he was seeing that guest list as someone who's been networked in that industry for 20 years. So I think it's also important to have agile project teams within the traditional reporting structures.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
That avoids the confusion as well that you guys were talking about in terms of senior managers getting 2 different sets of instructions or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think there is one of the implications of this is how do you make sure this functions for the senior management team? That's a theme that's come up several times. I want to pick up a question that Helen asked, where David and I actually have a very similar answer to it, which is, at what size of business is a board needed, including an external voice for good governance? When I first met David, we had a chat about what are the glass ceilings that you bump up against as you scale your business. So there's one that's about $2 million, £1.5 million turnover, where you simply cannot be a founder-dominated business anymore. There are very few companies where that person is spidering and octopusing and everything. Many businesses stop there. The next one, which is a bit more subtle, is, and I said to David, I think it's about £3 million. And he said, well, I think it's about $4 million, which is about the same at that time in history. And at that point, if you don't have governance structures and you're not moving to at least a collegiate model of decision making, you've got to be a kind of terrible genius to keep scaling your business. So the answer is, if somewhere between $2 and $4 million, you're starting to bring in, you know, rational, data-driven, collegiate decision-making, whether you've got a formal or informal board, it's going to be really hard for you to break through that ceiling. And it's interesting. One thing that we do with our database and the Media Entrepreneur Meetup is that we only ask one profiling question, which is, what's your turnover? And we see the huge attrition between that $4 million level and then people who can scale up to, you know, $6 million, $12 million, become a platform in their own right. It's a really big predictor of future growth is governance. So that's my answer. But I welcome other answers from around the virtual room, actually, in terms of at what point have you had to move to more of a formal board? You know, when did it work? Was it too early? Was it too late? So Lucretia or other members, happy to hear from you.
If you're lucky enough to have somebody pulling the wagon along with you, as we do, you can probably get by a little bit longer without a formal board. If you're a solo sort of CEO, Helen, I think, you know, 4 million US is I continue to agree with that, and that fantastic conversation we had when we first met, Piers. You know, that's where you just need somebody sort of challenging you to keep your focus on, I think. So and in any case, even if you're lucky or you're just heroic or something or other, by the time you hit 10 US, I think you're just not going to be able to keep going. Then that becomes a limit.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Piers, might I simply add, why wouldn't you? If good governance is your friend, then it'll make it easier. Running a big business with you know, above 3 or 4 million turnover on your own, without all the structure and reporting and governance and accountability that goes with a properly functioning board, why wouldn't you do that? You know, I mean, you know, just to share with you, I've about 3 or 4 months ago, I decided to take Fridays off. Now, nobody takes Fridays off if they're a founder running a business. They work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, etc. Like, that's the thing, and I've been doing that for years. And actually, although I don't honestly take every Friday off, people know not to put a date in my diary. And normally, Friday lunch is a really nice time to meet with some of my clients. And generally, it migrates, as a British way, through to sometime late in the afternoon. And that's my choice. That's what I want to do. And sometimes I'm out on the bike in the morning, and sometimes I'm not. But the point is, that's been life-changing for me, and that's enabled because I've got a good board. So why not?
Yeah,
why not?
Well said.
It makes life easier.
Well, you've segued us neatly, and no doubt you've done that on purpose, having read the script, into the kind of the personal journey for both the founders and the integrators. I'd like to start with David and Tony. Just, you know, we've talked about the practical implications of it, but what's your journey been like? You know, from sort of day-to-day, hands-on in the business, CEO responsibilities, to more of the visionary work you're doing now. And what's it like, and what would you have done differently that you haven't already said? David, maybe if I could ask you first.
I think looking back, I probably should have gotten some coaching, because there was a point in my career where I'd been the COO and the CEO for over 25 years, and suddenly I was just the CEO and I wasn't the founder. Founder and CEO is a full-time job. For a $10 million company, CEO shouldn't be a full-time job if that's all you're doing. So I think, you know, that 2013 point, I think if I gotten like kind of an executive coach in there, I would have learned faster than I did. So that's one thing I would say. But the other journey is, you know, I got involved in this business in 1982. The whole business has changed, so it's kept intellectually stimulating the whole way along. But I'd also say that 2013 inflection point that Lucretia described was the most dramatic and challenging personal change for me. And that's given me a lot of energy. You know, the humility of realizing you're not particularly good at something, that gets me out of bed in the morning, gets me out on the bike, Tony. It's like today I'm going to do this a little bit better. So I would say the personal journey is I've just been fortunate enough to be excited the whole way along, which is none of my friends outside of the information industry can say that. So that's really important. Also, to have had my first partner, John Marquez, maintain that friendship through health problems and everything was wonderful. And the friendship with Lucretia and, staying together and working through some of these things, that's like, you can't pay for that. That's like just a gift. So, yeah.
I mean, we've got a quote in one of our ebooks from Emerson that an institution is the length and shadow of one man, or you should say person. But you could say in a partnership like this, it's a long shadow of the relationship dynamic as well. The more that's functional, the more that your parents who speak to each other and know your boundaries, the better an organization you create. Tony, what about your journey?
So for me, I mean, I've got to say, I find myself feeling hugely grateful to the people who've helped me to get to here, and in particular to Ben for trusting us a year ago. We came out of the blue, and he trusted us to give him what he needed to do what he's brilliant at doing, which is one of the reasons the business is doing so well. A couple of interesting little proxies for success for you. So I was asked the other day, just a week or so ago, what I was still selling by my sister. What are you still selling? I said, I'm not selling anything. I used to be responsible for all the revenue. I used to be delivering 50 to 70% of the revenue. Don't deliver anything anymore. Fantastic. Next bit of information for you. The head of sales earned more money this month than anybody else in the company. That's a sign of success to me, of a business working really, really well. Yeah. I think the other thing that is interesting is I get to this stage in my career. My dad retired at the age of 56. I'm now 61, so I've got 5 years. I'm still working hard. I'm still passionate about my business. I've got to say, I'm more enthusiastic, more passionate, more driven in a focused way to realizing the potential of what we've built now than I ever have been before. And I don't foresee myself stopping work. I see myself choosing to work in a different way on different things. And it's a real privilege, honestly, only made possible by some good people around me who have trusted me. And of course, I've shared the story. So the answer is, Piers, I think, I'm close to realizing my lifetime ambition, which is to build a business that's got a sustainable standalone presence that doesn't depend upon me, from which I can make some money, and that's where we're heading.
Thank you. That's lovely. Lucretia and Dan, sort of question for both of you. What advice do you have for other incoming presidents, CEOs, and COOs who are working with business owners? And which is a way also of asking what's been good and bad about your journey with your partner.
Yeah.
Lucretia, you'd like to go first?
Sure. Well, again, going back to our inflection point and the said survey and everything, I think one of the takeaways from it, which might not have been overtly stated, but it was clearly saying, hey, we don't want the David and Lucretia show anymore. Like, we're ready to play a part in this. So back to the shadow of the institution being about the relationship. And I think the most healthy direction we could take the relationship from there was to make it about the organization. I mean, for us, it'll always be, David and Lucretia, because that's a pride. I'm grateful and joyful for all of that. But really, I think as integrators, Dan, I don't know if you feel similarly. I feel like the onus is a bit on us, and it's also sort of, I think, a gift of a responsibility to push some of the uncomfortable formality, sort of, talking with the CEO and founder, and because we're the one person I think can get she or he to really appreciate the need for that formalized role, the delineation of tasks, roles, and responsibilities. So I think some of that is on our shoulders to sort of, formalize more in the organization and move beyond the founder and integrator show, or however you want to describe it. So I would encourage that. Take some of the discomfort. It'll be well worth it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Dan?
No, I think that's entirely right. And I think where I've got it wrong, maybe in some of my previous integrator roles, is if the founder hasn't mentioned it or considered it a problem, maybe I've left it as well and not broached it. And I think what I've done differently this time around is, as you just mentioned, Lucretia, is to just tackle it head on. And I think it comes back a little bit to that emotional intelligence that Ed, I think it was you who brought it into the conversation earlier on. And that approach that Tony referenced as well. So, okay, we've found a point of misalignment here or disagreement as to how to develop something. Sit down, face to face, talk it through, find the equilibrium, which you can sometimes forget. And we've had, shouting over Zoom or whatever it may be, never gets you very far. So I think just taking a breath and figuring out a way to get beyond those speed bumps is key.
Thank you. I think there's a prize here, and Andy Swindler said it eloquently following what Tony said about this not scheduling things on Friday. Staying chronically busy, Andy says, does not always mean we're actually doing good work. It's something he keeps working on. I think it's particularly important for the founder to look after their mental health because they can have a disproportionately destabilizing effect on the culture, and it shouldn't be down to their business partner to be the sensible one.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really great note.
The management consultant who Lucretia mentioned, Ron, who we used, like in the first 10 minutes started saying, you got to slow down to go faster, and just kept repeating it. Like he barely met us. And so to the point you're making, it's, that when you get to be at 5 million or something like that, oh my God, here's a bright, shiny object is just the death of your financial success for you just can't be doing that anymore. Because you'll destroy your managers. You'll just, they'll have terrible time trying to catch the fallout of that kind of stuff. So I very much agree with Andy's comments and the Friday concept.
Thank you. I think some really great takeaways from today. I've learned an absolute ton. I want to thank everyone who came, especially David, Lucretia, Tony, and Dan, not just for your insights, but for your honesty. I think it's really great for everybody. Thanks for those who made contributions from the virtual floor. I think the really big takeaway for me today is about getting comfortable with discomfort and having those uncomfortable conversations. And particularly if you're the founder, it's the uncomfortable change you have to make within yourself that will set your organization free. I really heard that loud and clear, and it's really pissed me off. So thank you for that.
Perfect.
And I think also there was a very inspiring plea for diversity of thought in the business as it scales. And I think that's something that we all should be thinking about today as well. So thank you, friends at Renewed, for hosting. Thank you, friends at Meetup, for promoting. And thanks everyone for coming. Really great to see you all.